The first pasuk begins, it tells us that Sarah Imenu lived 127 years, and it concludes Shnei Chayei Sarah. So Rashi explains, it's obvious, if she lived 127 years, these are the years of Sarah Imenu. She explains Kulun L'Tzo Tova, that all the years were, regardless of the pain and the suffering she had, in retrospect, they were all good, because she understood how every event that she experienced was for the best. It's not only based on Emuna, Gamzu L'Tova, Dayan Emes, but actually she was able to understand every detail, why it had to be that way, therefore it's for the best. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh explains it this way. There's a discussion in the Medrash that how did Sarah Imenu pass away? The Medrash tells us that Satan had come to Sarah Imenu and said, do you realize where Yitzhak is? Your husband has taken your son. He bound him as a sacrifice, as a burnt offering. He has him on the Mizbeach, on the altar, and he has a knife, and he's going to. And she understood, slaughter him. It was too much for her to deal, and she passed away. That's the Midrash. So by Satan alerting her, although he never finished, saying that he was not killed, she played it out in her own mind. That was beyond her capacity to be able to deal with it. Here, all her life, she waited for this child, and now her husband is going to slaughter him. That's why she died. So there's two ways to explain it. Does it mean initially she was supposed to live only 127 years, but her death came about as a result of Satan informing her that her husband is about to slaughter her son? Or no, she was meant to live many more years, but her life was cut short because of this event with Satan. So there are one of two ways to explain it. It's unclear from Chazal. Did she live a full life or no? Her life was cut short. So if you would understand her life was cut short, Sarah Imenu, all the years she would have lived, she would have continued to what? To do mitzvahs, to serve Hashem. She mean to say all the years that she was denied life, she was denied all that opportunity to do more mitzvahs. Is she accredited for those years that she did not live? Because if she would have lived them, she would have, no question, she would have fully invested them in serving Hashem. So Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh explains it this way. Shnei Chayei Sarah. I'm going to read the Ohr HaChaim inside. L'fima shepirashti, shemayu lahagid shemeisa machmas tzar. Yagar HaKosov Shnei Chayei pirush shilmoch Shnei Chayei shekitzvu lo. It means that she actually lived a full life, according to the other interpretation. Elo shoye siba shemisa al yodo, meaning she lived a full life. However, she passed away due to the Sultan informing her and allowing her to believe that her son was being slaughtered. According to the other interpretation, as a result of being informed by Sultan, she did not live out her life fully. What the Torah is sharing with us is the mishpat of chesed, the law of chesed, which Hashem deals, and He allows those who beloved Him to be treated this way. He called tzaddik shlo hishlo miyamav l'siba yodua. Tzaddikim who did not complete their years for whatever reason, as the Gemara tells us. What does Hashem take tzaddikim? Sometimes Hashem takes a tzaddik because the generation needs atonement, so that misat tzaddik is mechaper. The death of tzaddikim atones for the generation. It wards off the midas hadin. But factually speaking, the tzaddik being taken early, he wasn't able to live the years and perform. So if that's the case, if he never performed during those years, he denied the schar that he would have had if he would have lived those years. The answer is no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu fully compensates him as if he would have lived the years. He called tzaddik shluhishim yom of l'sibidua lo yigareya Hashem itzadik mashoyim arviach. Ilo yechai shodav shleimim yashlu schoro kol hashonim al hashonim shel Paul bem dover. He'll be fully compensated for all the years that he did not live, as if he lived those years. Ki yomer elov ilo yisechai. Because the tzaddik could say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I would be alive, Tavosio is l'sagol dover tov. My only interest and desire would have only been to bring about only good. Hu omro shnei chayisoro. So when the pasuk concludes shnei chayisoro, kiven el ashar shekol shnoseo hayu chayim mimeno v'iruch bichvodo. Meaning, although she only lived 127 years, but shnei chayisoro, she was compensated and rewarded as if she would have lived her full life, which was beyond 127 years. This is the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. So Rabbeinu Bachya, I saw it many years ago, and I tried to locate it. I didn't locate it. That Rabbeinu Bachya asked a question. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he does, knows the future, we explained what's the reason why a person has to be in a situation of challenge. Hashem could have created a person and put him in Olam Haba, created a person that he should bask in God's radiance. What does a person have to first meet challenges? And then afterwards, he has to earn his share in the world to come. He has to earn his relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? So the famous Yerushalmi, but the Ramchal explains it in a number of locations, that what is the basis for relationships? Basis for relationship is commonality, because the more there's commonality, greater commonality, there's greater compatibility. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, his state of shleimus, of perfection, that's unattributed to anybody but himself. Hashem is perfect on an absolute level. It's not attributed to anything but himself. If a person only does good because he takes the initiative to do an action which brings about that good, and if he chooses to do bad, the wrong, it's only due to his initiative that he chose to do the wrong thing. So what is the result of the good which came about? That act is attributed to himself. If I force somebody to do a mitzvah, it's like if I force one to do an avera, to violate Shabbos, to eat not kosher, he's not held accountable. There's no liability. Why? Because the action is attributed to the external force. But if the person takes the initiative and he chooses to eat kosher or to eat not kosher, why is he liable or deserving for that action? Because it's that initiative which was taken, positive or negative, was only due to himself. The basis for that action is not attributed to anybody but himself. So when a person does a mitzvah due to his own choice, which is his own initiative, therefore he's assuming Hashem's persona that this what I accomplished, which is positive, is similar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that whatever level of shleimus Hashem has is not attributed to anybody but himself. As a result of that, it creates a greater commonality between the person and Hashem. Therefore, he becomes a greater beneficiary of the relationship, what we call Olam Haba. This is the way the Ramchal explains it. And that's the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. He explains why a person is deserving when he does the right thing and why he's culpable when he does the wrong thing, because it's only due to his own initiative, positive and negative. That's the Rambam. So the question is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that if the tzaddik would live, he would what? He would do the mitzvah. He would do the mitzvah. So if that's the case, what if to be punished? HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that a person, if he would live, he would do the wrong thing. Hashem can't punish you unless you cross the line, unless you transgress. So that Russia has to come into existence to go through that process of doing the wrong thing. But a tzaddik, where Hashem knows if he would live, he would do the right thing. So if that's the case, why put him through all the trials and tribulations if Hashem knows he's going to succeed? immediately put him in the world, put him in a state where he can bask in Hashem's radiance. So Rabbeinu Bachya explains, if the world would only have Rishoyim, would only have evil people, and there would be no role models, there'd be no representation of good, a person would never have a chance. Choice would be undermined to a point, you would not have choice. You have all kinds of people in this world. You have tzaddikim, you have Rishoyim, you have middle-of-the-road people. So now we have representations of everything. As a result of that, a person has now what to choose from. There's discernment. But if there's no tzaddik in existence, he doesn't see an alternative. He only sees one way. As a result of that, it's the context of choice doesn't exist. So the tzaddik that he exists is not for himself. In terms of his own share in the world to come, Hashem knows he would choose right. So he's only living the tzaddik only to give someone else a chance to be a tzaddik. And to give the Rasha a liability, you could have been the tzaddik, you had a representation of tzaddik. Why did you choose to be the Rasha? So that causes the Rasha to be what? To be held more accountable. You could have chosen. You can't say you didn't know. The tzaddik exists. That's Rabbeinu Bachya. But what about if Hashem has to take the tzaddik for whatever reason, as he says, "Nei sibi yodua," so the tzaddik can't be shortchanged. He's fully rewarded, as if he would have lived those years. Because he says, if I would have lived, I definitely would have chosen to do the right thing, continue. Therefore, Shnei Chayesar, although Sarah passed away before her time, and she was taken, she's accredited for all the years that if she would have lived, she's fully credited for those years. That's the principle. Avraham was supposed to live 180 years. He passed away at the age of 175. Why? Because Hashem promised him that when he passed away, he'll pass away b'sefer tova, a good, ripe old age. If he would have lived those other 5 years, he would have seen Esav choosing and displaying a level of evil which would have caused Avram tremendous pain. So Hashem took him 5 years before, so he should not have that pain, so he should be able to pass away b'sefer tova in a good old age. So the 5 years Avram, if he would have lived those other 5 years, how much more could have he accomplished? Only God knows. But those, according to what we're saying now, those 5 years that he did not live, although, see, if you'd say it's due to your failing, which Yaakov, there's a famous explanation from Tosfos that Yaakov was meant to live 180 years, but because he said 33 words to Paro, he had those years deducted from his life. Or Yosef, because he heard when his brothers, before he revealed to them that he's Yosef, and they thought he was the viceroy, they referred to Yaakov as of Avdecha Avi, Avinu, or Avdecha Avi, our father, your servant. So the Medrash says, because he heard it 10 times, and Yosef, it was a disrespect. How do you allow yourself to be referred to as the master and your father the servant? Therefore, if every time he heard it, he had 1 year deducted from his life, Yosef. That's the Medrash. He's supposed to live 120 years, but because he remained silent those 10 times, for each time he remained silent, which disrespect, he had a year of his life taken. So those years, why did he not live those additional years? It's due to his own failing. Is he credited there? See, in terms of Avram, it's unrelated to himself. Hashem did not want him to witness and have that level of pain. So there's no question. He's fully credited for those years he didn't live. But if it's due to your own failing, that's why you were taken. Is he credited for the years that he could have lived, which he didn't live? I'm not sure. Ramban asks, do you know Yitzchak was not at his mother's funeral? He was not there. Where was he? So Ramban says that after the event of the Akedah, my Rosh Hashiva used to say, The Gemara tells us in Brochos that the Hasidim Rishon, the original Hasidim, they would spend an hour preparing for the Shemona Esrei. Shachas Kodem Tefillah. Meaning, if you take a look in the Ramchal, you're going to have an experience, you're going to have an audience. You have to mentally, emotionally meditate to understand what you're about to experience. So they would prepare themselves for an hour before they entered into that audience with Hashem. And then it took them an hour to say the tefillah. And then after the tefillah, it was shoachas achat tefillah. Now, what was the shoachas achat tefillah? Whatever that experience was, they had to reflect on it to fully retain whatever that experience was. That's the shoachas achat tefillah. Do you know what that Kedem was? It was a moment. It was on the location of the Kodesh Kadoshim, where ultimately the Holy of Holies. One of the reasons why Yitzchak eyesight was impaired was because the Malachim, when he was about to be slaughtered, the tears, whatever that means, went into his eyes, and that's why his eyesight was diminished. It was a moment of holiness. He's referred to Ola Tamima. He's the unblemished offering. He has a stay. He's a consecrated person. And that's the reason why the Medrash tells us he was not permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael. Because just as a korban, you're not permitted to take out of the confines of the Azor of the sanctuary. Yitzchak was not permitted to leave Eretz Yisrael. He was an entity of holiness. For 3 years, he was reflecting on that experience. That's why he wasn't there. He was not aware his mother passed away. After 3 years, he came back. The timing is perfect. When he came back, what did he see? He saw Eliezer coming from a distance. And who was with Eliezer? Rivka. And as he sees her, Eliezer calls him, "You're my master, and this is your wife." And they're married. You understand? So Soram Imenu, for whatever reason, at that moment had to be removed. Rivka is born, and Avram, it says Avram passed away. After Yitzchak becomes the patriarch, there's no mention of Avram any longer. Although Avram lived many years after Yitzchak. But yet it says he passed away. Why did it say he passed away? Because for all intents and purposes, at that moment he became a private citizen. He was no longer the patriarch, which was he's providing the future of Klal Yisrael. Whatever he had to provide was provided already. Now Avram lives as a private citizen. Instead, so Hashem took Sori Meno at that moment, because Rivka had to be born ultimately to be the matriarch of Yitzchak, the wife of Yitzchak. After Rivka was born, and she could be the successor of Sori Menu, Avram. We said Avram was informed immediately after the Akedah that Rivka was born. The future wife, the future matriarch is in place. Mesa Sarah passed away then. Ka'omram Zal, as the Gemara quotes the more in Yuma, Shein Tzadik Nifta Min Olam, Elke Nola Tzadik Kamoso. One tzaddik is not taken from the world unless a replacement is born. Shenema v'zorach Hashem shebo Hashemesh. The sun shines when the sun sets. There's no such thing as the sun setting unless the sun shines at the same time. So although one tzaddik is being taken, the other tzaddik is born to replace the tzaddik that's being taken. So since Rivka Imenu had to be born, because she's going to be the ultimate wife, the future matriarch, therefore the Thomas Sora. There's a the Chassam Sofer eulogized his Rebbe. Chassam Sofer had two Rebbeim. One Rebbe was Rav Nosson Adler, was the great Makubal. He was a Kohen. He refers to his Rebbe, Rav Nosson Adler, as HaKohen HaGodol. as the Chassam Sofer is referring to like the high priest. That's how we esteemed the Revidim. And the other Rebbe was the Baal HaFlo. Baal HaFlo was one of the leading Torah sages in his time in Germany. And there are a number of Svarim on Shas, Ksubis, on Kedushin, which were authored by him and other things. So when he said a hesped for his Rebbe, the Baal HaFlo, when he passed away, he asked the question, when a person dies, especially a great Torah sage, we grieve, we mourn. But he says, but if the Torah tells us, it alludes to it, V'zorach shemesh u'boah shemesh, that when one tzaddik is taken, another tzaddik replaces him immediately. Why are we grieving? The replacement is there. But why are we at such a loss? We're bereaved. Why? That's the question he asked when he was eulogizing his Rebbe. So he says it's true. V'zorach shemesh u'boah shemesh. So the person is born into existence, but how many years does it take for him to develop to be the equivalent, to be as effective as his Rebbe was, or the person who was taken, takes years. The tzaddik may be born, but to be able to reach a level of achievement, to be effective, it may take another 40 years. So there's a void, there's a vacuum for 40 years. He says that's what we're grieving. That's what the Chassam Sofer said on his Rebbe. Zorach Hashem Bo Hashemesh. When Sari Meinu passed away, Rivka was born. But she did not become the matriarch until Yitzchak married her, which was 3 years later. And that's when Yitzchak became the patriarch. You can't be a patriarch unless there's a matriarch. So there was a gap. But nevertheless, for her to be born, Sari Meinu had to be taken. That's what Thomas saw, but that's why she had to pass away.
Rabbi, just a question. Who said Kaddish?
But Thomas Sora Bekiras Arba. Sora passed away Bekiras Arba, he Hebron. Beretz Canaan. That's Hebron, the land of Canaan. The Yovo Avram Lispo the Sora of Livkoso. Rab came to eulogize Sora and to cry for her. He cried. Let's take a look at Rashi. Why was the location called Kiryas Arba? It was the community of four. Al Shem Arba Nokim Shoyu Shom, because that was the location. There were four giants who lived in that area. Achimon Sheshi Talmai Vavim. That's what was called Kiryas Arba. It was the Kirya of the giants. It was the village or the Kirya, community of the giants. Davar Acher. Al Shem Arba Zukos Shenikvu Sham Ishvishno. There were four couples buried there. Who are they? Adam v'Chava, Avram v'Sora, Yitzchak v'Rivka, Yaakov v'Leah. That's why it's called Kiryas Arba. So the way I explained it was like this. In essence, people may have called it Kiryas Arba because there were four giants there. And where do you have a location in the world where four giants are in one community? But in reality, why was it Kiryas Arba? Because the most special couples were buried there. As it says, Adam Chava, Avram Sora, the four couples. That's what, but in reality, the way why it was called that, people believe because there are four giants. I'm going to explain in a minute. We find that Ephron, after Sari Meinu passes away, Avram has only one interest, buying the Mars Machpelah. And Ephron was the owner. So he had to negotiate with Ephron. And initially, Ephron said, consider it a gift. And ultimately, he took a king's ransom for it. And from there, we see Risham Omrim Harbe Enemos Mafilumat. Risham, they promise you the world, and they don't deliver as much as an iota. That was Ephron. Okay? How did Hashem protect that location? If Adam and Chava are buried there, the handiwork of God, of Hashem, the most special couple initially, how do you protect nobody else should be buried there? Nobody should even know what's there. So the Medrash says there were Ruchos Ros and Shadim. If you would go into that location, you would die. The moment you entered in that cave, you would be zapped. You couldn't survive it. So it was a location which had no value. And yet Avram wants it. He's willing to pay a fortune for it. If you want it that badly, you're going to pay for it. So Ephron believed he was duping Avram. That Avram was a fool. You have all this money, you want to pay anything. Because they didn't know. Hashem only created that setting because he didn't want anybody even to know what's in there. Nobody else should utilize that location as a burial location. If you knew Adam and Chava were there. So what was the location called? Kiryas Arba. Because 4 giants. But the reality was that location, that's where the 4 couples are going to be buried. The most 4 special couples in the history of existence. Okay? So they're both true. Why do they call Kiryas Arba? What people are not prophets. The 4 giants existed then. 4 couples, that's the future. Even though Adam and Chava were there now, Avraham and Sarah weren't there. They don't even know Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. What they know the future. The Torah is telling you why the location is that, because that is the reality of the location. Okay? Lisbo the Sorah of Kosa. Now, this is the famous Rashi. How do we know that Sarah Imenu passed away as a result of the Akedah? The Torah juxtaposes the passing of Yitzchak, the passing of Sarah to the Akedah. As a result of being informed about the Akedah, that a son was in a setting to be slaughtered, and right before she was told he was about to be slaughtered, she couldn't deal with it, and her soul departed from her. That's how she died. That's the juxtaposition of the Akedah to the passing of Sarah Imenu. But if you take a look at Levkosa, the kaf of Levkosa is small. The question is, why is it small? So I always mention in the name of the Ksaf Sofer, he offers an explanation. Says first he eulogized her, then he cried. You mean say he didn't cry before? When he heard that she passed away, he didn't cry? I mean, it was his partner and everything in life. Sarah Avram Megayres Hanoshim. Sarah Megayres is Hanoshim. She's the mother of what? Of Yitzchak. How does he not cry? The answer, of course, he cried. Now, what is a hesped? What is a eulogy? When a person, God forbid, is informed that his spouse, his partner in life, passed away, the person is devastated. And you're just broken and you cry. But at that moment, until you start articulating, delineating why that person was so special, it's just you've overwhelmed. It's not because you feel the void and the loss of anything particular. You just feel you're lost. You're abandoned. When you say the eulogy and you start articulating and speaking about specific things about that person, it's a different level of crying. Because now each sob, each pain is attributed to something which no longer exists. It's not the person no longer exists. What that person represented no longer exists. Therefore, it's Lisbo the servant of Levkosa. I'll give you an example. People make a big mistake. Nichem Avelim. There's a mitzvah, it's chesed, to console the mourner. What do people do? They go to a shiva house and they distract the person from whatever it is. They want to somehow alleviate the pain. So they talk about nonsense. Remember, we went on vacation, all kinds of nonsense, even if they talk about the deceased. We want to speak about why was she special? What was she? Because many people don't know what a person is. And when the husband hears and is touched by no longer having that special person, first, it evokes certain feelings. Ultimately, it's positive. It alleviates the pain because simultaneously the person hears how other people or the person shares with others, and they appreciate the value of the representation of that person. So therefore, the crying after the eulogy is a different, qualitatively, it's a different crying. But of course, he cried before. Tomorrow we'll discuss why the cuff is small.
Rabbi, I was just thinking, in terms of